Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tearing into a really fascinating document. It's a concept note laying out a pretty compelling proposal.
hmm
We're doing a deep dive into the idea of setting up a dedicated early career network, specifically for Africa, kind of nested within the Global Land Program.
That's right. And the global GLP ECN, the Early Career Network, it only just launched in 2023. The idea was really to boost scientists early in their careers,
Right.
especially supporting those from regions that, well, haven't always been strongly represented in global research stuff. And this note we've got here, it makes a really, really persuasive case for why a specific chapter focused just on Africa isn't just like a nice idea, but actually pretty essential.
Yeah, okay. And our mission here for this deep dive is to really zero in on the core insights just from this concept note.
Mhm.
We want to understand the driving forces behind this proposed African chapter,
Mhm.
uncover precisely who it's designed for, map out what sorts of things it plans to do, and, importantly, look at the strategy for how it plans to fund it all sustainably. We're sticking strictly to what's in this document.
Exactly. And like the note argues, it's not just, creating another group for the sake of it. It feels like a direct response to some very specific critical needs and, well, the unique situations researchers are facing on the continent right now.
Okay, let's unpack this then. First big question, the why. What's the fundamental reason given in this document for needing a separate African chapter? Why not just the global network?
Well, the source lays out what I see as basically a seven-part argument. It really makes the case that Africa's context is different enough, challenging enough, that it just really needs this focused regional approach.
7 parts. Okay, let's hear them. What's argument number 1?
So the first one, and you could argue it's the most critical, is the need to address region-specific land system challenges. The note really hammers this home Africa faces this unique mix of interconnected land issues.
Like what specifically?
Well, incredibly rapid land use change, massive deforestation in some areas, desertification expanding in others, really high vulnerability to climate change impacts. Think droughts, floods.
Yeah, we hear a lot about that.
Exactly. Plus, huge food security pressures, super complex land tenure systems that vary all over the place, and of course, significant biodiversity loss. So the argument is a dedicated network can really focus research, collaboration, capacity building directly on these urgent problems.
Okay, so making sure the research hits the nail on the head for problems in Africa.
Precisely. And building right on that, the second point is about tackling underrepresentation and enhancing inclusivity. The source is pretty blunt, acknowledging that African early career researchers, even though they're doing vital work, often don't have the same visibility in global science forums.
Right.
So this proposed network is explicitly designed to, proactively engage and support them. It wants to break down barriers, things like language. It specifically flags needing to include Francophone and Lusophone researchers.
That's important.
Yeah, and also improving access to resources, funding chances, international connections, that sort of thing.
Making sure those voices get heard globally. Makes sense.
Absolutely. Which then leads straight into point 3, the need for tailored mentorship and capacity building. Because the hurdles ECRs face in Africa can be, well, pretty distinct.
How so? What kind of tailoring are they talking about?
So the note gives examples like workshops on grant writing that focus specifically on getting money from African regional bodies or national grants, or those international funders who are specifically interested in African research. Not just generic grant advice, or say scientific communication training that tackles challenges like language barriers, or just how to navigate the whole international publishing game effectively from their position.
So tools that are actually useful in their specific environment.
Exactly. They also mentioned data analysis training, focusing on open source software, R, Python, GIS, which is key when you might be dealing with data scarce situations.
Right. Good point.
And importantly, leveraging senior African researchers as mentors. People who genuinely understand the local scene, the career pathways there.
Okay, that covers tailored support. What's the 4th reason?
Number 4 is fostering stronger regional networks and collaborations. Global links are great, but building solid connections within Africa is seen as vital for tackling those issues that cross borders, like managing shared river basins or wildlife corridors.
Yeah, transboundary issues.
Exactly. And also just promoting South-South collaboration between researchers in different African countries.
So helping scientists, say, in Ghana, connect with folks in Nigeria on shared challenges.
Right. Then the 5th argument is about strengthening the science policy interface within Africa. Land science isn't just ivory tower stuff, right? It's hugely important for informing policy across the continent. Think big things like the African Union's Agenda 2063.
So connecting the research to the decision makers.
Precisely. The network aims to build those bridges, directly link ECRs with local regional policymakers, make sure the latest findings are actually accessible and, can feed into decisions.
Bringing the science right to the policy table. Okay.
Yeah, closing that notorious gap. The sixth point highlights leveraging local and indigenous knowledge. Africa has this incredible wealth of traditional knowledge systems about land management, conservation.
Absolutely.
The note emphasizes that this network would create ways to explicitly integrate this valuable local knowledge with, let's say, conventional science, aiming for more holistic, more effective solutions on the ground.
That integration feels really critical for anything sustainable.
It does. And then finally, the seventh point is about driving increased ownership and relevance of GLP activities in Africa. The idea is, if you have a dedicated chapter led by African ECRs, the work and priorities of the wider Global Land Program become much more directly aligned with and relevant to African needs,
Right.
which should lead to, greater engagement, more impact, and make GLP's mission more sustainable there.
Wow, okay. That's a really thorough set of reasons. The emphasis on tailored, region-specific, and that active inclusivity. It's not just buzzwords. It seems really baked into the logic for why this network is needed.
It really does feel that way. It seems to come from a deep understanding of the specific context, the specific challenges for ECRs in Africa.
So if that's the very compelling why, let's move to the who. Who exactly is this network for? What are the criteria? Who gets to be part of this community?
Okay, yeah. The concept note lays out the core criteria. It's basically a combination of someone's career stage, their connection to Africa, and what the research is actually about.
All right, let's break those down. First up, career stage or the early career status. How's that defined?
Right. So it's designed to be pretty inclusive. It covers current postgraduate students, masters, or PhD candidates that, as long as their research fits within GLP's scope. It also includes postdoctoral researchers. The typical definition they use is being within, say, 5 to 8 years after finishing their PhD. But the note does mention flexibility here, accounting for career breaks or just different academic system timings.
And what about people not in that standard university track, maybe
Yeah.
working for an NGO or government?
Good question. Yes, the note explicitly brings in early career professionals or researchers. These are people in the early stages of a research-focused career, but maybe outside traditional academia. So like junior lecturers, research fellows, or researchers in NGOs, government agencies, even relevant private sector roles if their work fits the GLP themes.
And the same time frame applies, like 5, 8 years.
Yeah, typically within 5 to 8 years of their highest relevant degree or when they started that dedicated research role. But again, they stress flexibility, allowing for self-identification if someone's had a less linear path but still fits that early career spirit.
Okay, seems quite encompassing for early career. What's the second big criterion?
That's the crucial connection to Africa. And the note defines this in a few ways. First, simply being an citizen of any African country. And importantly, this includes diaspora, so even if they're currently based elsewhere.
Right.
Second, it's for individuals of any nationality who are currently based at an African institution. So, formally enrolled as a student, employed, affiliated with a university, research org, NGO, government body, whatever, located in an African country.
So an American researcher working at a university in Kenya, for example, could join.
Exactly. And then there's a third way in. For individuals, again, regardless of nationality or where they are now, if they have a significant research focus on Africa. Basically, their main research, study, or practice has to clearly be centered on land systems within Africa.
Oh, okay.
This lets researchers who are really deeply engaged with African contexts join, even if, say, they're based at a European university, but their work is all about land use in the Sahel.
Got it. So connection via citizenship, location, or research focus. What's the final piece for eligibility?
That's engagement in land system science. Essentially, you need to be actively involved in research, study, or practice that falls under the wide umbrella of the Global Land Program.
And what does that include? Can you give some examples?
Sure. The source lists things like research on land use change, land cover change, land governance, food security issues, climate change impacts on land, biodiversity conservation related to land use, sustainable land management, socio-ecological systems, how urbanization affects land, or that whole complex water, energy, food, land nexus.
That's broad. What about academic background? Does it matter if you're a geographer or an economist?
No, it's deliberately multidisciplinary. The note is clear. Open to people from geography, ecology, sociology, economics, anthropology, political science, environmental sciences, agricultural science, you name it. The key thing is that their work contributes to understanding land systems. And they really stress this intention for inclusivity, again, not just across disciplines, but making sure they reach people across all of Africa's subregions and the major language groups. Anglophone, Francophone, Lusophone, Arabic-speaking communities, all specifically mentioned as groups they want to engage.
It really sounds like they've put a lot of thought into making sure this network can genuinely reflect the huge diversity of researchers and knowledge connected to the continent.
Absolutely. That principle of intentional, broad inclusivity seems right there from the start.
Okay, so we have the strong why and the inclusive who. Now for, well, maybe the most interesting part, the how. How is this thing actually going to work day to day? How do they put the leadership team together, and what kind of concrete stuff does the note say members will actually do?
Right, the operations. The note details this multi-stage process for forming the core coordination team, the group that will actually drive the network's activities.
How does that kick off?
It starts broad, with an open call for expressions of interest and nominations. They plan to push this out through GLP channels, obviously, but also really target African academic networks, professional bodies across the continent, trying to get wide reach.
And if someone's interested in being on that team, what do they need to submit?
They'd need their CV, naturally, and also a concise statement. This statement needs to cover their motivation, why they want to help build GLP ECN Africa, plus relevant skills they bring, their vision for it, and importantly, confirming they can actually commit the time needed.
Okay, makes sense. And how does the selection happen from those applications? Who decides?
There's a defined selection process. They propose setting up a small but critically diverse selection committee.
Who would be on it?
The note suggests it could include the person or people who initiated the whole idea, maybe reps from the global GLP office and the global ECN, and crucially, one or two respected senior African land system scientists, perhaps folks already linked to GLP.
And what are they looking for?
They'd review based on eligibility, motivation, skills, sure, but also on how well the applicants contribute to the team's overall diversity, making sure there's representation across regions, languages, disciplines, gender, etc.
So the leadership itself should reflect the network's diversity goals.
Okay.
And once that team is picked,
Then it moves to phase 3, the inaugural meeting. This is where the chosen coordination team formally gets together, probably virtually at first, for accessibility. They define specific roles like who's chair, who handles communications, events, that sort of thing, get to know each other, and hammer out an initial action plan for the first, say, 6 to 12 months.
right, setting the immediate agenda. So that's the team structure. Now, the activities, what will members actually do? What's planned?
The note lists a whole range of activities, and the constant theme is that they should be ECR-driven, accessible, and collaborative. A huge pillar is clearly capacity building, hitting those tailored needs we talked about earlier.
Okay, give us some concrete examples from the note. What does that look like?
Absolutely. They propose specific grant writing workshops, but focus uniquely on, say, African regional funds, national funding bodies over there, and those international grants that specifically target African research.
Right, not generic advice.
Exactly. Also, scientific writing and publication clinics, these are designed to support researchers, maybe helping with writing in English if it's a second language, giving guidance on picking the right journals, navigating that whole submission process.
Very practical support for real hurdles. What about research skills?
Methodological workshops are key there. Training in data analysis using open source tools like R, Python, GIS, geographic information systems, essential tools, especially when dealing with potentially limited data in some African contexts.
Yeah, that open source angle is smart.
Definitely. They also suggest training in participatory research methods, really important for engaging well with local communities and integrating that indigenous knowledge we mentioned, and skills training for writing policy briefs and general science communications, so research actually reaches policymakers and the public in Africa.
They even mention trying for language-specific support sometimes.
Yes, acknowledging the multilingual reality. So that's skills, but a core function is also just networking.
How will they facilitate that?
Things like informal, regional, virtual coffee breaks just to connect, more formal ECN Africa Showcase webinars where ECRs can present their work to each other and senior folks, matchmaking initiatives to help people find collaborators, building a shared database so you can find someone with specific expertise. And organizing dedicated sessions or workshops at big African science conferences.
Creating those connections. What about guidance from more senior people?
Yep, that falls under mentorship. The plan includes developing a structured Africa-focused mentorship program. This would connect ECRs with senior researchers based in Africa or experienced international researchers who have deep experience working on African land systems.
Okay.
Peer mentoring among ECRs is also encouraged, and maybe things like Ask Me Anything sessions with established scientists or journal editors, maybe even policymakers.
That sounds incredibly valuable, getting advice from people who really get the specific context.
Exactly. Providing that context-specific support is the goal. Another big area is research dissemination, basically creating platforms for members to share what they're doing.
Like how?
Contributing to newsletters, maybe supporting or leading special issues of journals focused specifically on African land systems, collaborating on those targeted policy briefs aimed right at African organizations.
Getting the research out there and synthesized for the right audience.
Precisely. And directly tied to that is engagement with policy and practice. Activities here could include workshops focused on how to navigate the science policy interface in different African contexts, facilitating dialogues between ECRs and African policymakers, practitioners from NGOs, government, community leaders.
Right.
And they also really champion promoting the co-production of knowledge, where ECRs work with communities and stakeholders right from the start to design research that addresses their needs and leads to solutions developed together.
That links straight back to making the science relevant and impactful, one of the why arguments.
It does. It's about making sure the research serves the continent's needs. And finally, the note mentions community building more broadly.
What does that involve?
Things like an online forum for members to share info, support each other, discuss challenges, maybe having some kind of recognition or awards for members' contributions, and actively trying to tackle shared regional challenges, like maybe finding ways to improve data access or deal with internet connectivity issues that can hinder collaboration.
Wow. It's clear these planned activities are really detailed and seem intentionally designed to tackle the specific challenges and opportunities for ECRs in Africa. They directly mirror the why for setting up the network.
They certainly seem to have thought it through. It looks like a comprehensive vision grounded in those identified needs.
All right, now for the really crucial question, the one that affects the long-term health of any initiative like this: funding. How will all this activity be paid for, not just to get started, but sustainably for the long haul?
Yeah, the money question. The concept note tackles this directly, proposing what looks like a deliberately diversified funding strategy. They clearly want to avoid relying on just one source.
Okay, so what's the starting point? Where does the initial money come from?
It starts internally, leveraging initial seed funding and support from the global GLP itself. The document argues pretty strongly for a dedicated, ideally recurring annual budget line from the main GLP budget, specifically for ECN Africa.
Kind of like an internal investment.
Exactly. Positioning it as a strategic investment that helps GLP achieve its own goals around capacity building and inclusivity, especially in underrepresented regions. And beyond just cash, it suggests integrating ECN Africa activities into existing GLP event budgets, like earmarking some travel funds from big GLP meetings to specifically help ECN Africa members attend.
Okay, so building on existing GLP structures initially, what about looking outside GLP for money?
That's the second major pillar, external grant funding. This means actively going after grants from foundations and philanthropic organizations that have a clear focus on Africa, or support early career researchers, or invest in capacity building, or fund research on relevant themes like climate resilience, food security, stuff like that.
Does it name any specific ones?
Yeah, the source actually gives concrete examples of foundations that could be a good fit, like the MasterCard Foundation, Ford Foundation, Mo Ibrahim Foundation, and the Carnegie Corporation of New York's Africa programs, just as illustrations, of course.
Okay. And what about big international development agencies?
Absolutely. Major aid agencies like USAID from the US, SIDA from Sweden, GIZ from Germany, the UK's FCDO, JDA from Japan, they're listed. Plus various UN agencies, and even looking at potential funding through the African Union or the regional economic communities. The key is aligning proposals with the strategic priorities for African development.
Yeah.
And also, research funding bodies that have international or specific African components are mentioned, although getting those might often mean collaborative proposals with researchers in the funding country.
So a wide range of institutional funders to target. What about partnerships or sponsorships?
That's the third stream, partnerships and sponsorships. This could involve getting in-kind support or maybe co-funding from African universities and research institutions themselves.
How would that work?
Could be many things, offering free venues for workshops, providing some admin support, sharing access to labs or equipment. The note even floats an idea of institutions becoming formal supporting institutions, maybe with a small annual contribution to show they back their ECR's involvement.
And the private sector, is that mentioned?
It is, but cautiously. The note suggests exploring ethically aligned private sector sponsorship, specifically from companies with strong CSR corporate social responsibility programs focused on, say, environmental sustainability or education in Africa.
But there's a warning label.
A big one. It stresses that any private sector money must meet strict ethical guidelines to absolutely protect the network's scientific independence and integrity. No question about that.
Very important point.
Yeah.
Okay, what about generating money from within the network itself, like membership fees?
That's the fourth stream, but the note treats this one very carefully. Self-generated revenue. They mention the possibility of charging nominal fees for workshops, but only if absolutely necessary, like a last resort. And critically, they emphasize needing lots of scholarships or fee waivers to make sure everyone can still access them.
So accessibility is key.
Totally. The strong preference is clearly for activities to be free or heavily subsidized for ECRs. They mention potential future services or consultancies way down the line once the network is really mature, but again, with the big caution that this must never take away from the core mission of supporting ECRs.
Okay, so definitely not planning to rely on membership fees or charging for everything.
No, that seems clear. And the note finishes the funding part by really emphasizing the key things needed to build a sustainable strategy beyond just getting the first grant.
What are those core elements for making it last?
Number 1, diversification. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. 2, developing a consistently strong case for support, really being able to sell the network's value and impact. 3, a phased approach. Start with internal GLP support, build a track record, then go after bigger external grants. 4, lean operations, keep admin costs low, use the ECR team's volunteer energy, favor cost-effective virtual stuff.
Smart use of resources.
Yeah.
What else?
A dedicated, ongoing fundraising effort by the leadership team. It doesn't just happen by itself. Maintaining full transparency and reporting to funders, actively building and nurturing long-term relationships with supporters, and finally, consistently showcasing success, collecting stories, tracking metrics, proving the impact.
It's clear the thinking goes way beyond just launching the network. There seems to be a real strategic plan here for making sure it can thrive and keep serving the community for years, built on a resilient funding base.
It certainly looks like a very considered approach to long-term viability based on what's in the note.
So we've taken this deep dive into the concept note, really unpacked the compelling reasons why an Africa-focused early career network within GLP is seen as necessary. We've explored the specific community it wants to serve, really defined with that intentional inclusivity across nationality, location, research focus, language. We've mapped out the pretty robust and tailored plan for its activities, everything from capacity building and networking right through to policy engagement. And we've examined this strategic, diversified approach laid out for funding the whole vision sustainably.
Yeah, and what really stands out reading through this source is that it's not painting a picture of just, another academic committee. It feels like a really targeted, well-thought-out effort. It's designed specifically to empower African early career researchers to really magnify their vital contributions because they are vital to understanding and tackling Africa's complex land challenges, and significantly to amplify their voices and influence in the wider global science world.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, here's maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to consider, drawing from the potential woven through this document. Think about the possible ripple effect here. If a network like this is successful, how might a thriving, interconnected, well-supported community of African early career scientists actually reshape our understanding of global land systems? Could it significantly speed up progress towards sustainable development, not just across the continent, but maybe globally too? How might empowering these specific researchers with their unique insights and local knowledge unlock some of the crucial solutions we really desperately need for the environmental and societal challenges facing our rapidly changing world?